welcome to UPSC Geek. Uh, Before starting, I would love to quote a famous poetry for you all, which can prove very aspirational and motivating before starting a lecture series of PSIR. So the poem start like this: चल पड़े हैं तो पहुँचेंगे भी, चल पड़े हैं तो पहुँचेंगे भी, और पहुँच के सजाएंगे मंजिल कुछ इस तरह, और पहुँच के सजाएंगे मंजिल कुछ इस तरह कि चलते हुए रुक जाएं, कि चलते हुए रुक जाएं, देखे और कह उठे वाह। गूंज उनकी तालियों की फिर गूंज उठे यहाँ वहाँ कहाँ कहाँ, गूंज उनकी तालियों की फिर गूंज उठे यहाँ वहाँ कहाँ कहाँ, और गूंजे उस तालियों की गुंज से नम्रता हमारी और भी नम्र हो जाए, चल पड़े हैं तो पहुँचेंगे भी. With this beautiful poem, I'd like to start our political science and international relation lecture series. It will be complete one-stop solution for you all. I see many fellow aspirants paying lakhs of rupees for their optional courses, but at the end they don't end up being very satisfactory. One more thing, guys. For convenient of the exam purpose, this entire lecture series will be in English, because in exam you will have to attempt the exam in English itself, so it will be easier for all of you to produce that in the same manner. So it will be very short English, so please try understanding and comprehending simultaneously. So today we'll be starting with the first lecture, that is political theory, meaning and approaches. This is the very first topic of the syllabus. Okay, before starting, let's see some of the previous year questions. These are the list of previous year questions. So you can see these questions from 2011 to 2022, like continuously questions from this particular topic has been asked. And I can assure you that post going through this lecture series, this lecture video, you will be able to answer all these questions holistically, and it will help you fetch good marks. The content in the PPT can also be helpful while making your notes, and you can quote the same example, definition, and case studies, etc. for your exams as well. It will fetch you great marks. So guys, let's start with the first topic, that is political theory, meaning and approaches. So the first slide, you can see the content list. The slides contains introduction to political science, approaches in political science. We have basically three approaches, that is traditional approach, modern approach, and contemporary approach. Okay, and there are sub approaches within each approach, like traditional approaches have philosophical approach, historical approach, and etc. Simultaneously, modern approach and contemporary approach as well have various sub approaches. Okay, then the third is we will be seeing the similarities and differences between major traditional approaches, and same similarities and differences between major modern approaches. It will also include criticism. Then we will be concluding the entire series, and again we have already seen the PYQs. Okay, so let's start with political science, guys. So what is political science? Very interesting. Political science is one of the oldest discipline. It has its root in ancient Greece, and it started as a branch of philosophy. We all know that how Plato and Aristotle and Socrates, being father of political philosophy, they all started as a philosophers, and then they gradually propounded the theories of political science, like theory of state of Plato and etc. We will be seeing them all in detail in further lecture course and series as well. So don't worry about all this, just listen to it calmly and give yourself time. So Aristotle is considered as father of political science. Okay, he called political science as a master science. So let's see why he calls political science as a master science. Okay, it denotes the interdisciplinary nature of political science, and it is a science to be learned by the masters. Okay, science to be learned by the masters. So who are the masters here? Masters are those who have to deal with the decision making in the state. Okay, so as you will see the Plato's idea of philosopher king. Okay, he also denotes a king to be a philosopher, a master who has to deal with the rule decision making in a state. Okay, so thus the study of state constitution became the core concern of political science. All right, according to Garner is again a political scientist. So according to Garner, political science begins and ends with the state. Okay, political science is the systematic way to study state and power. To like give a one-liner definition of what political science is, political science basically is the systematic way to study state and power. So the next point is the art to run a state is known as politics. So when we hear the term political science, is the systematic way to study state and power. The genuine question is, what is politics? Then we hear in very usual terms so many times, like what is politics? Don't play a politics with me, and etc. in very whimsical manner. But what politics is in actual sense? So the art to run a state is known as politics. This definition of politics is basically given by Leo Kong. Okay, so let's see evolution of political science, how political science evolved from ancient time to the present scenario. Okay, so if we look at the evolution of the discipline, it was dominated by philosophy in ancient times. As I have already told, during the time of ancient Greece, it was philosophers who invented the concept of political science, the subject of political science basically. Okay, it was overshadowed by the religion scriptures in medieval times, and it was Machiavelli who established the autonomy of politics from ethics and religion, and the autonomous status of the discipline was recognized. So we can see three streams of political science here. First was philosophy in ancient Greece. Second is religion and scripture, how religion played a great role in political era during the medieval times. And third is Machiavelli's pragmatic political view, which is a modern perspective on political science. And here we can see the stream of evolution of political science. Okay, till the Second World War, political science primarily developed in Europe, and after Second World War it shifted to USA. In Europe there has been greater emphasis on philosophy. In USA there has been more emphasis on scientific research. Okay, so here we can see the distinction between the development of political science in Europe and development of political science in USA. Political science in Europe was more philosophical oriented, whereas political science in USA is more scientific, empirical oriented. Okay, so till Second World War, we call the state of discipline as traditional political science. So before World War One, we call the stream of political science or the discipline of political science as traditional political science, because all the traditional methods such as philosophical, historical, etc. dominated the discipline of political science. It focused on the study of state and constitution, right? For example, Aristotle formulated his theory of state and power by analyzing the constitution of 158 state. Okay, so the traditional political science mainly focused on the study of state and constitution. The field was dominated by philosophical methods, historical and empirical methods. Okay, in the field of comparative politics, study of constitution was prominent, hence CMN's legal institutional method was played great role. Okay, so still the traditional certain traditional approaches like legal institutional methods still is very much prevalent in comparative politics, where we have to compare the different legalities and institutional aspect of a state of different states or nation. Okay, so that we will be covering in depth in comparative politics, but just have a gist of it, right? So that it don't sound alien to you when we speak of the same during our discourse of comparative politics. So continue. Okay, so after Second World War, like we have seen how till until First World War traditional political science dominated the political arena, but now we are saying how after Second World War political science developed in USA under guidance of APSA. So what is APSA? It is basically American Political Science Association, which led to the development of behavioral method. Okay, so just to give you a gist, what is behavioral method? Behavioral method, as per the David Stone, is basically the more scientific approach to the political science. So he says that he propounds the idea of universalities or regularities in political behavior developed, expressed by a few political factors, right? So if we take into the consideration of those particular regularities in political behavior, and if we do scientific analysis of it, that will render us more scientific approach towards political science, and hence it will eliminate all the biasness, values and etc. from the traditional method, and it will give more appropriate, more scientific approach to the political science. So that is very like basic meaning of what a behavioral method is. Like it is a more scientific approach towards political science. Okay, so behavioralist, so the school of philosophers who belong to behaviorism are called behavioralist. Okay, so behavioralists focus on the study of human behavior rather than institutions. Okay, so as I have already told you how the traditionalist approach, they used to overemphasize upon the institutions, here the behavioralist focus on the human behavior which can more explicitly be observed and also analyzed. Okay, the second is scientific methods rather than philosophical, legal or historical methods. Okay, so behavioral methods were later on modified into post behavioral approach. So with evolution, there were also some deficiencies found in behavioral method. So hence certain set of philosophers who propounded the idea of post-behavioralism. Okay, so in American university, post-behavioral approach is the primary approach for research in political science. Now in most prominent American universities, Ivy League university, and etc., post-behavioral approach is very prevalent when it comes to political science, because it also give a gist of analytical science, okay, which can also be studied and applied science, sorry, applied in the field as well to solve the various problems prevailing in the society. Let's say recent election happened in various states. There were huge anti-incumbency tendencies seen in various states of, let's say, Madhya Pradesh and etc., where the incumbent government was ruling since last 2 decades. But why still the same party has come to the power? The behavioral approach could not answer to the real problem of the societies, but applied science, that is post-behavioral approach to political science, would be able to answer the same set of questions. Why that particular sentiment swayed the mentality or the sentiments of the voter, and which led to the again re-incumbency of the same party which was in power against the stream of anti-incumbency. Okay, so these are the set of examples, guys, which you can also quote and also enhance the quality of your answers in the exam. There is also a revival of philosophy in Europe, which has given rise to new approaches like postmodernism, feminism, critical theory, and etc. So again, like post behavioral, first is behavioral, second is post behavioral, and third is like modernism, feminism, and all the critical theories which advantage in the Europe due to the emergence of again a essence of philosophy in Europe. Okay. So let's conclude to evolution. It is the conclusion to evolution. Political science is a vibrant discipline with expanding frontiers, as we have seen the gradual process of evolution since ancient times to the present arena, from traditional to modern. Under modern, we have behavioralism, post-behavioralism. Then we have contemporary. In contemporary, we have postmodernism, feminism, critical approaches, and etc. Right? So we can see how the frontiers of the political science is continuously and gradually expanding. Okay, so new areas of research are emerging, ranging from family to environment. Okay, at times discipline became too expanded that there was a fear of discipline losing its identity. Hence, scholars like Theda Skopol calls for bringing the state back in. Okay, bringing the state back in. We saw how the traditionalist approach started with constitution and state and institutions and etc. So Theda Skopol basically propounds the idea that with a gradual expansion of frontiers of the political science, we are somewhere losing the true essence of political science. What was the true essence of political science? To study and analyze the institution of the state. Okay, so the scientist is basically propounding the idea of bringing the state back in, a call to make state a core area of research again. Okay, so political science as a discipline have greatest utility among social sciences, and it needs to be actively promoted in universities by funding agency. Very valid point, right? So let's see the various approaches in political science. So there are mainly three approaches in political science, which is traditional approach, modern approach, and contemporary approach. Okay, so the first is traditional approach. So let's see what is traditional approaches. So traditional approach to political science were widely prevalent till the outbreak of Second World War. Okay, as I've already told you, the till 1920s and etc. there was prevalent use of traditional approach in the political science. Okay, these approaches were mainly related to the traditional view of politics, which emphasized the study of state and government, as I've already told you. Okay, therefore traditional approaches are primarily concerned with the study of organization and activities of the state. Fair point. Okay, so guys, one thing also needs to be taken into consideration is that the points which are highlighted here, can help you retain the concept much better. Okay, so you can note down this pointers somewhere so that you can revise it and recall the concept better. I think you can come back to the lectures whenever you want to for revision, but this key point uh, keeps on repetitive in your brain. It will uh, help you enhance your retention power basically. Okay, so yeah, so let's see the characteristics of traditional approach. What are the various major characteristics of political approach? So the first is they are largely normative. So what is normative wise? Normatives are basically the field of philosophy which mainly developed through the idea of norms, various values, various beliefs, etc. prevails in society, right? If there is a great, let's say, philosopher, Socrates, he thinks something and he propounds his, let's say, his theory of knowledge. On the basis of his theory of knowledge, which is his norms, his opinion about theory of knowledge, it will become a norm for the further scientist or the further political philosopher to study upon, and on the basis of that they will develop their line of theories. Let's say Plato was the student of Socrates. According to, based on the theory of knowledge of Socrates, he's developed his theory of idea and etc. So they are basically normative. In the simple definition, normative is basically a idea which is developed by a norm or a belief or a opinion which is prevailing in the society of particular time. That is norm. Okay, emphasizing on the study of different political structures. As I have said, that it was basically the study of state organization and institution. So it mainly focused on the study of various political structures like legislative, executive, judiciary, constitutions. Okay, made a little attempt to relate theory and research, as it was normative, and normative becomes very subjective, and hence research will not be so effective in this manner, and hence it made a little attempt to theory and research. Very valid point. Okay, this approaches believe that studies in political science can never be scientific. Very valid point, because it is very subjective, completely developed from the norm, no scientific research and etc. So it can never be done in tandem with research or scientific research and etc. So yeah, the first sub part under traditional approach is philosophical approach. Okay, so what is philosophical approach? For philosophical approach is basically, the word philosophy comes from ancient term philosophia. Okay, philosophia means a true love for knowledge. Philo means love and sophia means knowledge. Okay, so the true love for knowledge, a very tough, a very hard, very strong Greek terminology, that is philosophia. Okay, so the entire philosophy stream, discipline of philosophy starts with this term philosophia, that is love for knowledge. Okay, philosophy is the study of general and fundamental problems such as those connected with reality, existence, knowledge, values, reason, mind and language. Very valid point. This approach is concerned with the establishment of an ideal society with norms and values. Okay, so we have seen how the final goal of all the normative or philosophical thinkers such as Plato, Socrates, Aristotle, etc., were the attainment of ideal society. Okay, they are also called as the father of political idealism, because if they have a theory of state, the state should be the best, the philosopher king should be best, which is not very much pragmatical in today's lens, but during that time it could have been possible. Okay, that's why they have propounded the idea of ideal society. So the basic point during those times were aspirants, that if you know what is the best and if you try to aspire for the best, if you cannot reach to the best at least you will be able to, let's say, reach to the 99% of the time. So they used to give a ideal society to the people, to the fellow citizens of their society, so that they can always aspire for the best in the society, and they will always, if they walk on the path of the best, they will end up being a good, if not best. That was the basic funda or the philosophy behind giving an ideal society with norms and values. Okay, so Socrates is known as father of philosophy. He has given the theory of true knowledge. According to him, the real knowledge is the knowledge of ideas. Okay, and the mode of learning this knowledge is logic, and so Socrates prescribed dialectics. Okay, so we will be seeing what Socrates' theory of knowledge is in detail in further lectures, and So just to give you a gist, basically he says that knowledge is immanent in every human being. Just we have to engage ourselves in dialectic. What is dialectic? Dialectic is basically logical exchange of reasons in question answer manner, so that the immanent knowledge within us gets reignited. We know everything, we just have to ask ourselves the right question in order to get the right answers from within. The basic gist of the theory of knowledge of Socrates is this. Just remember this. And when we talk about the theory of knowledge of Socrates in further lectures, you will be able to reconnect the dots in very effective manner. And you will love the concept because it is very beautiful indeed. So why this knowledge is superior according to Socrates? Okay, we have seen the knowledge of idea is the superior. So the very valid question is why this knowledge is superior according to Socrates. Okay, so physical world is a world of change. So Socrates is propounding the idea that physical world is a world of change. Hence, there cannot be a permanent knowledge. Okay, so he says that the physical world where we are being right now is continuously changing. Okay, and something which is continuously changing, the permanent knowledge about that changing being cannot be attained. Okay, we cannot know the permanent knowledge or the idea about about something which is continuously changing, because if you know something about if you know about something right now, the next moment the same thing has been changed, and now you have to match the pace of your knowledge to that changing being, which is impossible, right? So whereas the world of idea is a world of permanence. Sorry, he says that the world of idea is a world of permanence where the knowledge will be at most or the superior, because you are getting to know the knowledge or the idea of permanence. Okay, hence this knowledge is of permanent nature, subject to the condition it is a product of logical reasoning, that is dialectic. Okay, so what Plato has to say about the same? Plato is basically a student of Socrates. So what Plato has to say? Plato is called as the father of political philosophy. Okay, as Socrates was called the father of philosophy, Plato is called as the father of political philosophy. He has suggested that it is not enough to understand the features of existing states, it is more important to understand the idea of state. Okay, as we have as on the line of Socrates idea of world of change, Plato also propounds that it is not enough to understand the feature of existing state, because existing state will bound to change. Okay, it is more important to understand the idea of state. What is the idea or the ideal knowledge of the state? Okay, the purpose of existence of the state. What is the true purpose of the existence of state? Okay, so when we understand the idea, we can mold the existing state which are bound to be imperfect into towards perfection. As I have already told you, if we aspire for the ideal, that is the perfect state, we can mold the imperfect state towards perfection. We can at least try to mold imperfect towards perfection, because we know the ideal, what the ideal state looks like, the perfect state looks like. And the state right now we are seeing is a state of chaos, right? And if we know the difference of the two extremes, will be aspiring to bridge the gap and make the chaotic state into an ideal perfect state where everyone is happier, right? Peace is prevailing, which is the sole motive and sole goal of any human existence. So thus, besides the advantage of getting the foundational or permanent knowledge, philosophy can help in making our lives better. As I've already told you that the happiness, peace, and etc. will help us make our lives better. Plato emphasized that knowledge of philosopher is not just for his betterment, but for the betterment of the society. Fair point. Thus, philosophy has a huge utility for making our lives better. Okay, philosophical approach is the oldest approach present in the political science. Well point, because it started during the time of ancient Greece, in ancient era, right? During the time of Socrates, Plato, and their lineages. Okay, so it is the oldest approach present in the political science. Political science is started as a sub-discipline of philosophy. Classical scholars dealt with philosophical issues or normative issues like justice, equality, rights, liberties, right? So like if you read the dialogue of Plato, you will get to understand what this basic dialectical question is, like what is justice. If justice is giving its due to someone, then is it good to give what is not ode to someone and etc. This is something which you will get to read in the dialogues of Plato and etc. And sometimes it becomes very very difficult to understand that dialogue, but if you will truly understand the idea, that is essence of those dialogues or those exchanges of questions and answers between Plato and his disciples, you will get to understand the true gist of what a common man thinks and what a ideal man like Plato or a philosopher like Plato, Socrates think of the same idea, right? So philosophical approach remained dominant approach till Second World War, as I've already told, till the ancient times to till almost till Second World War. The philosophical approach or the traditional approach remained the dominant approach in political science. Major development happened in Western Europe, that is US and UK and etc. So what are the various criticism of philosophical approach? Okay, so philosophical approach came under criticism by behavioralists. So behavioralists were the basically the modern political thinkers or the scientists. So they will obviously criticize the philosophical approach. Okay, so let's see on what basis they are criticizing the philosophical approach. So behavioralists wanted to make political science pure science. Okay, pure science as in the case which can be testified, which can be refuted, which can be verifiable. Okay, we will see them in detail as well. Hence they rejected the study of normative issues. They advocated the study of facts, okay, based on research, based on observation and etc. Lord Bryce held that we need facts and facts. We need facts and facts. This exhibits the intensity of the fact, which was the need of the hour, right? Because due to over emphasis on the normative issues during the traditional time, the entire discipline of political science became very vague, because it was not under the scrutinization or verification, right? It was just the philosophical ideas of the thinkers. It was something which could not be verified on scientific research basis and etc., right? So the modern political philosophers like behavioralists like Lord Bryce, David Stone and etc., they put major emphasis upon the need for the scientific facts and research. So basically they criticize the philosophical scientists on the line of the same criticism. Okay, philosophical theories were criticized as armchair theories. They do not constitute verifiable and thus are not reliable source of knowledge. They also are inherently biased and diverged from the reality. Okay, as we can see how they are labeling the philosophical theorist as armchair theories, because armchair theories basically means something which is supporting theory, like they can only be preferred when it comes to get the idea or support for something. Like if we want to understand the true essence of justice, we just go to the philosophical theories, right? The traditional theories, and we just get the idea. That's why they are criticizing them as an armchair theories. They do not constitute verifiable and thus are not reliable source of knowledge. We cannot verify them, and hence they are not a reliable source of knowledge. They are also inherently biased and divorced from the reality. As it is very subjective, it is very valid to say they are like biased and divorced from the reality. However, scholars like John Rawls, Leo Strauss, Isaiah Berlin, Don Giomino believe that the philosophical approach is most suitable for the discipline of political science, because they give the idea. Okay, so this scientists such as Rawls, Leo Strauss, etc., they also put forward a very basic point that philosophical approach is most suitable for the discipline of political science, because they are the basic of the political science upon which the entire facade of political science has been put upon. Okay, so the conclusion, what can be a suitable conclusion to this philosophical approach? So politics is too complex. Choice of approach will depend on the objective of research. Okay, single approach is never sufficient. Different approaches needs to be used in combination. Okay, so it is not about seeing a particular approach is sideways. It is about a right concoction of every approaches, because every approach has something nice to render to the society. Okay, we can get the fair idea from, let's say, philosophical traditional approaches. At the same time, the behavioralist will give a more scientific approach to any political science issues, and hence the concoction or the nice synthesis of both will render the most pragmatical idea of any issue in the society. So this is the complete approach to the philosophical approach. Next we'll be seeing the Historical approach, guys. So this is a historical approach basically. So historical approach believes political theory emerged as a result of socio-economic crisis and its impact on the thinkers. Okay. For instance, the socio-economic conditions of Greece produced Plato and Aristotle, while the conditions of England in 17th century resulted in theories by Hobbes and Locke. Okay, very fair point. Like we have seen during the time of Plato, that is Peloponnesian War, how the socio-economic crisis during his time prevailed in Greece, nudged Plato to think about his city state of Athens into a betterment, okay, or the welfare of the Athens basically. Similarly, during the time of Hobbes and Locke, the Puritan or glorious revolution in the England 17th century, right? How this particular socio-economic crisis led them to propound their theories. Okay, hence this approach uses knowledge of history and applies it to the understanding of political science. The relationship between the two disciplines is explained by the scholars as if history is a root, politics is a suit. History is a past politics and politics is present history, right? Very valid, very beautiful point, very beautifully put forward. Like if history is a root, politics is a suit because whatever uh, politics is prevailing right now will be history for tomorrow, right? So if history is root, if it is yesterday, then politics is today. Very fair and valid point. So traditional international politics has been studied as diplomatic history. Okay, here we are also getting the essence of international relation and comparative politics. How the traditional international politics has been studied as the diplomatic history. Okay, right, like for example how our relationship was with, let's say, Pakistan, and there is a very high chances or likely that it would also continue today or tomorrow. Okay, so it was called as diplomatic history, right? Because our history also sometimes shapes our present and future. Okay, it was Machiavelli who strongly advocated the study of history to understand the politics. According to him, history rather than philosophy is a better guide for the prince. So here we can see how the history is taking the locus point from philosophy, right? And most pragmatic philosophers or thinkers like Machiavelli are propounding the idea that history rather than philosophy is a better guide for the prince, right? If you want to know what will happen tomorrow, just know what had happened yesterday. You will be able to predict what will happen tomorrow much more effectively. Okay, in modern times, scholars like Lasky and Sabine have preferred historical approach. Okay, so they are the main advocates of historical approach, Lasky and Sabine and etc. According to Lasky, every thinker is a child of his time. Very valid point. Remember this line, guys. It is a golden line to give a introduction of any thinker. Like when it comes to Plato, Plato is the child of his time, that is Peloponnesian War, right? Because socio-economic time of his era, that is ancient Greece, nudged him to propound his theory of state, his political theory. So every thinker is a child of his time. It can be used in the introduction of every thinker. So he also writes that no political idea is ever intelligible save in the context of time. Okay. According to Sabine, political ideas are themselves the products of the crisis phases of history. Very fair point. Okay. Historical approach is the most common sense based approach. It serves the requirement of a sound approach. Okay. So there are three requirements that are facts, causal, and evaluative. Okay. So factual, the history which has already happened, right? It is a fact. Then causal, what caused those sort of event. Okay, so the causal factor and the evaluation, if the causal factors are coming, can it lead to the same set of situation which was happening in like previous eras or previous generations, right? So the three main requirements: factual, causal, and evaluative when it comes to historical approach. So what are the challenges and criticism of historical approach? So history is too vast. Okay, like history is everything about yesterday and before, and hence it is too vast. It is challenging task to find out relevant data. Okay, so all that is in history may not be relevant, and there are many concepts in political science like philosopher king, communism, which were never present in history yet important for the student of political science, right? Like we learn the idea of philosopher king from Plato and etc. but there are no guarantees that they existed during his time as well. They were just the subjective ideas of the philosopher, and hence it becomes very very subjective, because it is oftenly said that the history is also written by the winners. Okay, and we never know what the winners are writing, right? We cannot go and check back to the history. Okay, so it becomes very very vague to understand whether it is relevant into this context or not. Okay, history in itself is a highly politicized discipline. Okay, so basically the winners or the rulers or the kings of a particular time basically engaged in internal politics, used to write history in order to sway the masses of their time. So they're highly politicized discipline. Edward said Orientalism show that the history writing has been political project. Very valid point. Okay, so political scholars may not use history in a scientific manner. Okay, Machiavelli himself has done the selective use of history. Okay, he used only those examples which served his political purpose. So very valid point that we have to use history as per the as per the requirement that suits our study. Okay, like if you see the idea of Machiavelli, that he's suggesting that the study of history should be very selective in order to match the requirement of our context or the our study. Okay, so criticism further. There are examples of political scholars making politics out of history. Karl Popper criticized Hegel and Karl Marx for committing the guilt of historicism. Very important concept, guilt of historicism. So, what is guilt of historicism? It means ideological use of history. Example: when Karl Marx explains history as a product of class struggle, his purpose is political, right? So, history is something which include most of the ideas which happened in the past, right? So, if Karl Marx explained the idea of, let's say, class struggle between the bourgeoisie and proletariat, right? He has used a particular part of history to suit his requirement in order to prove, right? So, Karl Popper criticized Hegel and Karl Marx for committing the guilt of historicism, right? To use history to prove our theories or our particular subjective ideas is basically a simple notion of guilt of historicism. Okay, John Clements has criticized making political ideas dependent on history. He suggested that political ideas would be understood on the basis of logic. Very fair point, right? So, what is the conclusion? Conclusion is politics is again too complex. Choice of approach will depend on objective of research. Okay, single approach is never sufficient. Different approaches needs to be used in combination. So, guys, you can see a kind of regularity in conclusion, right? So, this is a framework which you can use in the entirety of the syllabus, right? This is the basic idea, right? We know that everything cannot or anything cannot be taken directly as it is. We just have to take a right concoction or the right synthesis of various approaches in order to match our attempt to the answer, right? So you can like just remember this particular statement and keep on reproducing according to the need of the answer or the questions. Okay, but you also have to be mindful in order to add or subtract in order to enhance the quality of the answer to fetch a better marks. Okay, so the third is empirical approach. So what is empirical approach? So a quick revision, guys. We were seeing what was political science. Then we have seen characteristics. We have seen the various approaches of political science, like traditional approach, and under traditional approach we have seen till now philosophical approach first, second is historical approach, and third now we are seeing empirical approach. Okay, so what is empirical approach? Empirical approach is based on observation. Okay, empiricism in simple terms means something which can be observed. Okay, so we can observe the physical facts and human behavior, we cannot observe the ideas, right? So Machiavelli, so see here we are seeing this is a transition from a complete traditional approaches to the political science to the modern approach, right? How the political science discipline is transitioning from the normative science to the more scientific study or behavioral approaches, right? So observation is very key and important term here. So Machiavelli proposed empirical approach along with historical approach. He warns prince against living in the world of ideas, whereas he suggests prince to look at the things as they are. Okay, so he suggests the idea that the prince would be a lion and and a fox at the same time, right? So his notion of being a pragmatic at the same time being connected to the history is very important. Okay, if Plato recommends philosophy, Machiavelli recommends observation, right? Like how observation is very important. Aristotle is connecting link. Aristotle is something is a kind of transition between Plato and Machiavelli, which is giving a middle path, a pragmatic approach to the theories. Okay, Aristotle's theory of form emphasize on the interdependence between idea and matter. Okay, how idea and matter are interdependence, they cannot be uh, taken as a single entity, they both are interdependent. The world of being and becoming. Okay, in order to understand empirical approach, we need to compare it with philosophical approach. Fair point. So here it is a comparison between empirical and philosophical approach, guys. So these kind of questions are usually asked in the exam, like compare empirical and philosophical approach and all and etc. So this is the idea you can have while attempting your answer. So empirical approach basically is the study of facts based on observation. Uh, it are descriptive, that is describe what reality is. Okay. So what reality is, guys? Okay, what reality is like, it basically focuses on the present rather than what should be or what ought to be. Okay, criteria is based on true and false, like they'll accept if something is true based on observation and scientific study and analysis, and they will refute whatever is false which cannot be verifiable based on observation and scientific study. They are status quoist. Status quoist means something being in present, whatever is happening in the present, not they are talking about, neither they are talking about the ideal state, or not they are talking about very futuristic aspiration. Okay, so they are basically status quoist, who the empirical school. Okay, now the philosophical approach, they study the idea basically, like Plato, Socrates, etc., right, based on logic like reasoning, dialectics and etc. They are basically prescriptive, they prescribe the idea, prescribe like they propound, they tell what should be or what ought to be. Okay, criteria is right and wrong, what should be right and wrong, like the basis of ethics. Okay, and they are very change oriented, like empiricists were very status quoist, like Aristotle and etc. Plato, Socrates, the philosophical approach basically propounds the idea of change oriented, that change is the only constant. Okay, very basic, fair point. We have already seen the empirical approach. Now we are seeing the legal constitutional approach. Okay, so what is legal constitutional approach? So it is also part of traditional approach, guys. From next, like we will be looking okay, so it is a legal institutional approach. Okay, it included just the study of constitution of the Western world. Okay, since rest of the countries were colonies and had no independent political system. So it basically focused on Western world, because majority of the countries during those times were either the colonies of the Europe, or they were dependent. Okay, they were not independent, hence it majorly constituted the study of the constitution of the Western world, like UK and US. Okay, because all Western countries have been at similar level of development, their society's culture, way of life does not differ from each other. Okay, so these are the basic factors, like political system is mainly determined by the society's cultures and their level of development and etc. And hence, since the Western world have some sort of similar level of development, cultures and societies, it becomes very easier to compare their society or the constitution. Okay, so hence they were very few basis for comparisons. The maximum comparison could be done only that of the constitutions or the form of governments. Example, Aristotle comparison of 158 constitution to propound his theory of state. Okay, so since constitution or the forms of government was the focus of the study, the method that was used was legal institutional method. Legal institutional method is the study of laws and institutions. Okay, institution basically means various, like let's say legislative institution, executive institution, judiciary, institutions, and etc. The approach did not observe the norms like values neutrality, quantification, etc. And since it focused on study of institution, it was largely static and suffered from number of limitations because uh, legal institutional methods are something which is very reluctant to change. Hence, it was very static observation of this discipline and also suffered from number of limitations. Okay. So now we are seeing the this second part. We saw the traditional approach, the major approach, traditional approach, and the second major approach is basically modern approach, right? So to minimize the deficiency of traditional approaches, various new approaches have been advocated by the new political thinkers. Okay, these approaches are regarded as modern approaches to study political science. Okay, to tackle to refute the idea of traditional approaches, to tackle the deficiency of traditional approaches, a new school of political science, that is modern school, are emerging. Okay, so this approach is mainly concerned with the scientific study of politics. We have seen how the traditional approach was mainly based on normative approach. So modern approach is mainly concerned with this scientific, which is more empirical, which is more observational based study. Okay, so modern approach includes behavioralism approach and post behavioralism approach. Okay, so what are the major characteristics of modern approach? These approaches try to draw conclusions from empirical data. Okay, empirical data in the sense something which is based on observation and can be proved or verified, that is empirical data. They go beyond the study of political structures and its historical analysis. We have seen how the traditional approach was mainly based on a study of organization and their activities and structures and histories and etc. Right, it goes beyond the political structure and historical analysis. Third, political approach believes in interdisciplinary study because it also includes the discipline of, let's say, sociology, economics, etc., into the study of political science, and how the amalgamation of various disciplines leads to the holistic study of a particular society or the political society. Okay, so they emphasize scientific method of study and attempts to draw scientific conclusion in political science. Okay, so first is behavioralism approach. So David Easton is a political thinker who advocated a great deal of things when it comes to behavioralism approach, guys. So David Easton first pointed out the intellectual foundation of behavioralism. Okay, so this approach believes that there are certain uniformities in political behavior. Okay, so there are certain uniformities or regularities in political behavior which can be expressed in generalization of or theories in order to explain and predict political phenomena. Fair point. Okay, so there are certain regularities and uniformities in political behavior which can be analyzed or studied upon in order to formulate a theory to predict the political phenomena, is something which is dealt by behavioralist school of philosophers. Okay, behavioral approach in political science started after First World War. So we have seen how since ancient times to till First World War, traditional approach dominated, right? So right after First World War till Second World War and later, there were the emergence of modern approaches, and especially under modern approaches, behavioral approach was dominating this particular time frame. But it becomes prominent after Second World War. Okay, it was strongly promoted by American Political Science Association, that is APSA. The core idea was to make political science pure science based on research and study and observation. Okay, it denotes a complete change, that it change in the entire epistemology. Epistemology is the method of knowledge or the study, and even the ontology of discipline, that are structures of the discipline. Okay, when we change the method, it obviously change the scope and the nature, right? If we change or if we alter the way we study something, the nature and the scope also gets widened, and frontiers get very diversified. Okay, this behavioralism is often called this revolution. Okay, though some scholars prefer to call it movement as well, because the change was so huge, expansion was so huge, right? Charles Morium is called as the father of behavioralism. Okay, remember the name to quote in the answer. Okay, so evolution of behavioralism. So how behavioralism as a discipline under modern approach evolved after the First World War. Okay, so we have to look into the historical circumstances besides intellectual proposals. We also have to look the historical circumstances of world wars. Okay, after Second World War, academic conferences used to take place under United Nations. We have seen how the formation of UN and etc. Right, the Bretton Woods institutions, right? The scholars of different discipline used to be invited to give ideas on reconstructions and development, right? How the destruction caused post World War, First World War, led to the formation of United Nations, mainly to discuss uh, the course of reconstructions and development of the countries who were like catastrophically destroyed. Okay, in these conferences, political scholars were not invited, right? Political scholars of previous times were not invited. Why they are not invited? Because it was believed that they have nothing relevant to offer, because their idea was mainly based on the normative ideal perspective, right? They were not something which was very practical and real, right? Political science had become almost a dead discipline, right? So we will see how the political behavioralism evolved, right? So the first point is political scholars were not dealing with the contemporary issues. They were dealing with historical issues or ideal issues, right? They were not dealing with something which was contemporary during that time, like how to have a state which was completely destroyed to regain its status and etc., right? During the post World War One, they were dealing with the study of centuries old ideas. I've already told you, historicists like Sabine Dunnings were busy in writing the history of Western philosophy from Plato to Marx. There were several like commentaries on the dialogue of Plato to Marx and etc. They were not focusing mainly on the contemporary issues. So whereas other social discipline like sociology has long back incorporated scientific methods and positivism, right? So social science, there are like other major social sciences disciplines like sociology and etc., they have already incorporated various scientific methods to study and analyze the society and contemporary issues in prevalent in societies of those times. So political science remained far from adopting scientific methods for research. Okay, thus political theories were armchair theories, like a kind of supporting theory with little practical relevance. So, what are the intellectual factors? So, scholars of Chicago School of Political Science, Charles Merriam, Kathleen, were advocating for the behavioral, systematic, and value-free analysis, right? Understanding processes rather than institutions, considering the state of discipline. Attempt was made to revive, to regain the credibility for the discipline by incorporating scientific methods, right? So if we make political science as a scientific method, it will lead to the elimination of various biasness, values, and the idealness that was present in the theories of the thinkers, right? So there was the major focus on the revival of the political science as a more scientific discipline towards the uh, towards the a kind of approach to the contemporary issues prevailing in the society of those times. So, what are the features of behavioralism approach? Okay, so David Easton, again, he is a great propounder of behavioralism approach, guys. So you can always quote his name when attempting an answer. So there are direct questions asked from this particular topic as well, right? What is behavioral approach? What are the various features given by David Easton and etc. So these are the direct answer you can write there, as you can directly take them from the slides, right? So David Easton has given 8 features of behavioral approach in his address to American Political Science Approach Association. Okay, his purpose was to make political science a real science, right, which can be verified, which can be uh, based on research and etc. It means to develop the laws in political science just like the laws existing in natural sciences, right? As we have like how we see the laws of, let's say, Newton, right? Laws of gravity and etc., which is very much based on the studies, scientific studies, right? He also propounded the idea to make a real laws of political science, right, which can be universal and which can be testified or verified by observing the phenomena. Okay, like how Newton, lying under the apple tree, observed the phenomena of an apple falling on his head, and he developed his idea of, or his theory, or the law of gravitation. Similarly, David Stone is also wanting to sleep under some, let's say, some legislative, executive, or political phenomena, and he wants to develop a kind of law of political science which is very much practical, because the universality of that particular law will be applicable throughout the spectrum of political phenomenon. Okay, so phenomenon should have regularity, and thus developing the explanation, verification, experimentation, scientific laws are free from biasness. Okay, so he propounded the 8 features of behavioralism approach, right? So the first is regularities. Observe regularities in human behavior. Okay, so traditionalists argumented that traditionalists believe that regularities are not possible in human behavior. Okay, they are saying that the regularities cannot be observed in human behavior because human are always changing, right? And it is very less likely that they will continue the same set of behavior, right? Hence the regularities cannot be observed or possible to observe in human behavior. Why? There is no guarantee that the same person will behave in a similar manner under similar conditions twice, right? Because always evolving or changing. So second, systematization. First was regularity. Second is systematization. Okay, systematization. Scientific research is systematic. Hence, political research should also be systematic, right? There should be a relation between objective of the research and collection of the data. Systematic in the sense, if we are trying to study any effect, there should be a cause to something, right? So that is very basically a systematization of political science. Traditionalist view, according to traditionalist, social sciences are analytical in nature. Okay, hence we cannot be very particular with respect to systematization, right? The traditionalists basically believed in the idea of analytical approach in social sciences. Like they propounded the idea of subjectivity, values, norms, and etc., right, which cannot be systematically understood because due to subjectivity, each individual have subjective idea. The idea which I have is not necessarily you will also, or the any other individual will also have the same set of idea, and it will not be possible to study each and every idea systematically, right? The third is the technique itself, right? There should be a defined technique. Behavioralists suggest the adoption of mathematical statistical techniques, right, basically to verify the conclusions. Okay, so what traditionalists viewed this notion, there are very limited areas of research where we can adopt quantitative techniques, right? So what are quantitative techniques? Quantitative techniques are basically a set of techniques which uses mathematical statistical technique to prove the conclusion or effect of any theories. Okay, for the sake of technique, there is no point compromising with the subject matter. Okay, so the fourth is measurement. Just like scientific results are expressed in quantitative terms for the purpose of precision, political research should also be presented in the form of quantitative data or precision. Okay, so let's say for example, guys, like what David Easton is trying to prove here is that if uh, if electoral behavior, let's say for example, has expressed certain tendencies, let's say they have voted for BJP in the central government, uh, is there any chances that the same set of voting behavior can be measured and again reapplied in the future course of action, let's say in 2024 Lok Sabha elections, right? So if there's something which can be measured, the future tendencies or the laws or the universality of that particular law or the political science theory can be applied in future date also. So that's why they're saying that the applicability or the conclusion or the effect of particular political science theory must be bound to be measuremented. Okay, so what was the traditionalist view? Traditionalists basically believe that such approach will limit the scope of the subject, as there are very few areas where measurement is possible, like electoral behavior. Right, very valid point, because these are kind of social sciences or the normative science where you cannot measurement the behavioral of the individuals, right, who are the major subject of any society. So what is the fifth point? The fifth point is basically verification. It should be verified, like scientific theories. Political science theories should also be verifiable, right? So that a reliable knowledge is developed. Traditionalists continue to believe that verifiability is not possible in all cases. Example, we have to understand the idea of communism, which can be understood, explained only by logical analysis, right? Communism is something which cannot be verified, right? We cannot go to a to a state which is practicing communism and verify whether everybody is accruing equal benefits or not. That is something which cannot be verified, right? How will you verify the level of happiness I am accruing in comparison to someone else? Let's say my friend is accruing, right? So it is not possible. So that is what a traditionalist view is, right? So, and the sixth is integration. Integration means interdisciplinary approach. Political science has always been interdisciplinary. The only difference is the traditionalists looked for data in disciplines like philosophy, history and law. On the other hand, behavioralists suggest to borrow from sociology, psychology and natural science disciplines. So he short agrees that traditionalists also took the data, but they took the normative data from philosophy, history, and law. Whereas he suggests to the behavioralist or the modern perspective that to borrow the data from sociology, psychology, and natural sciences discipline, which are more pragmatic or more natural sciences, right? They even warn against bringing the discipline near to philosophy, history, and law because the data which we get from philosophy are very normative, subjective, and vague, right? Seven is value neutrality. Like scientific research is value neutral. Political scholars should also not prescribe value preferences, right? Value preferences in the sense the subjective normative ideas. Traditionalist like Leo Strauss is very critical of rejecting the values, right? So here the David Easton is providing the propounding the idea of value neutrality. In contrast to that, the traditionalist like Leo Strauss is very critical of rejecting the values. Why? According to him, when we ignore values, it is like not making any difference in pure water and dirty water, right? So when a dirty water becomes a pure water, when we add any particular value into that water, right? Like when we process that dirty water through filtration and etc., it becomes pure water. Hence, Leo Strauss propounds the or the criticizes the idea of rejecting the values, right? So 8 is pure science. When we adopt all the above parameters, political science will also become pure science. That is the basic idea of the 8 main features of behavioralist propounded by the David Easton. So what are the achievements of behavioralist? Okay, so political science was in the state of decline. Okay, behavioralists arrested the decline. So this is the major achievement of behavioralist or the modern school of philosophers or the thinkers, because the traditional approach became very normative laden or subjective laden. Okay, so it was almost in the state of decline, but behavioralists they stepped in order to arrest the decline by introducing a more scientific approach to the political science. Okay, so behavioralists made significant contribution in the field of analysis of electoral behaviors, right? The analysis of electoral behavior has been helpful for political parties in formulation of their strategies and programs, right? How using electoral behavioral as a political phenomena and inculcating a sense of let's say verifiability or measurement and etc., all the scientific or the features which was propounded by the David Easton are imbibed in the idea of electoral behavior, and hence analysis of electoral behavior became very scientific, and which helped the major political parties of various countries to formulate their strategies and programs, right? So that was the benefit of or the achievements of behavioralist, which can be said. So behavioral research helped us in understanding the difference between theory and practice. Okay, so like where to draw that red line between the theory and practice. Example, the elitist and pluralist investigated the reality of the democracy in Western countries, reality of socialism in communist countries, right? So one of the major area where behavioral research proved most useful was the study of the political system in the developing country, right? So behavioral research proved very useful in the studying of the political system in developing countries. Let's say why it was very useful. So there is a difference in the constitution and actual practice. Very valid point, guys. Like most of the developing countries, if you see, we have all, let's say, fundamental rights and etc., but it is very less likely that it is implemented in very effective manner, right? We see human rights violation and etc. very prevalent in so many major countries. So there is a difference in the text and context. Hence traditional approach like legal institutional proved inadequate, and politics of these countries require field studies. Okay, very valid point. Ki how field studies become very imperative in those countries, right? Underdeveloped countries like Africa, developing countries, and etc., where the field studies becomes very important in order to examine where the legal political institutions are really following the phenomena, political phenomena which they have constituted in their constitutions, right? Thus comparative politics become the major area of behavioral research. So now the decline of now the second school under modern approach is post behavioralism. Okay, so let's see what is post behavioralism is. So post behavioralism emerged out of the dissatisfaction from some aspect of behaviorism, right? So there was some dissatisfaction within the behavioralist school, out of which the post behavioralism emerged, right? So let's see what were the cause of that dissatisfaction. So behavioralists gave too much emphasis on the methods and techniques and believed that it was better to be wrong than vague. Okay, so behavioralists gave too much emphasis on methods and techniques, right? And believed that it was better to be wrong than vague, right? Post behavioralist, on the other hand, believed that the use of scientific tools in the beneficial if it can solve is beneficial if it can solve the various problem of the society. Very genuine point, right? If we imbibe a best mathematical tool to prove our conclusion, but if it is not beneficial on the ground level, what is the use there, right? So that is what the main dissatisfaction which was prevalent among the post behavioralists, right? That the behavioral school gave too much emphasis on the scientific methods and technique, that it lost the true touch or the true touch from the ground reality, right? And hence criticized behavioralists on the ground that latter had lost the touch with the realities of the society because of the overemphasis on the techniques. Okay, so David Easton, who was the main propounder of behavioral school, he himself propounded that the who gave the principle of behavioralism himself acknowledged that political scholars sitting in the ivory towers, okay, they are sitting in the ivory towers perfecting their techniques, have ignored the purpose for which the technique is used, right? So this particular statement emphasizes or explicitly shows the entire dissatisfaction which was resulted from the behavioral approaches. Okay, so political scholars sitting in ivory towers perfecting their techniques have ignored the purpose for which the technique is used. So we have seen how the decline of political science was there. Then the school of post behavioralism came and arrested that decline, right? So here it shows the decline, the stages of decline. There is also a previous year question asked which asked explain the decline of political science, right? So this is asked in this context, and hence it is very important. Like in the history of evolution of discipline of political science, we can see two stages of decline. Okay, so the first decline was before Second World War. In this case, the responsibility was on the traditionalist, primarily historicist, right? This decline was addressed by behavioralist. How the behavioralist came and arrested the decline of political traditional political approach, right, which was mainly caused due to because of historicists, Sabine and etc., Dunning and etc., who were only writing the historical discourse on Popper, Marx, and etc. They were completely ignoring the contemporary issues prevailing in the society, right? So the first decline was before Second World War. Then the second decline happened because of behavioralist, right? How the overemphasis on the scientific techniques and the methods really led to the lost of touch of the contemporary issues, right? They were like overemphasizing on the scientific techniques, which made their techniques or the approach very irrelevant to the current situation and the contemporary issues which was prevalent in the society. So what were the indication of the declines? Okay, so what was the indication which were what are the indications which expressed the decline, right? So during 1950s and 60s are the phases of lot of activism in USA, right? We saw how the civil rights movement, there have been various types of protests like civil rights movements, women movements, environmental and peace movements, feminist movements, and etc. How to address this crisis was a big challenge, right? This was the real contemporary challenge which was being faced by the behavioralist approach when policymakers had to look toward political scholars it was again found that they had nothing to offer because they were basically overemphasizing on the scientific techniques to prove their conclusion, which had no essence to solve something which was happening on the ground level. Hence the policymakers, they ignored the ideas because they had nothing to offer. Like they was not the theories were not basically, they were correct but they were not effectively being implemented or uh, able to be implemented on the ground level, right? Behavioralists were busy in making political science pure science. Very valid point. It resulted in compromise with the scope of the subject and relevance of the subject. Okay, so what is the feature of post behavioralism? So again, David Stern himself gave one more lecture, right, to the American Political Science Association. This lecture is titled as Credo of Relevance. Okay, David Stern called for creative theory. Okay, he calls for a creative theory. How very technique-laden theory can be altered as a more creative theory to deal with a problem which is more contemporary in nature. The two parameters of the creative theory are action and relevance, right? It means whatever research person is choosing, it should be relevant, action oriented for the benefit of society. Basically, a core idea of applied political science, right? Thus, he acknowledged the decline of the discipline because of the behavioralist. Easton clarified that technique is important, but the purpose for which the technique is to be used is more important, right? Purpose is more important than the technique. Okay, so Easton clarified that it is not rejection of behavioralism, rather it is taking behavioralism forward, right? With the sheer burden of techniques, methods, science, and etc., behavioralism was became overburdened, and hence it was hindering itself to move forward. Hence, Easton clarified to the APSA that post-behavioralism is not the rejection of behavioralism, rather it is taking behavioralism forward by offloading certain biasness or certain unnecessary values which is being imposed on behavioralists themselves. Okay, we can say that traditionalism is thesis, behavioralism is antithesis, while post behavioralism is synthesis. Very very important, guys. Remember this statement: traditionalism is synthesis, traditionalism is a thesis, behavioralism is antithesis, while post behavioralism is a synthesis. Okay, so you will learn more about the concept of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis in Hegel's idea of dialectic, historical dialectic, basically. So the assumption methodologies approaches remain same like that of behavioralist. Okay, so the assumption methodologies approaches, they remain same like that of the behavioralist. The only difference it makes is technique can be compromised for the sake of relevance, right? The main issue to deal with the problem or problem of the ground realities, right? There is no need to be value neutral. Values are needed in political science because political science is a normative science in itself. It cannot be completely value free. We need the values of our previous thinkers. Okay, so David Easton, he propounded the seven feature of post behavioralism, right? He was also advocated the eight feature of behavioralism. Here he is propounding the seven feature of post behavioralism, like how or what should be the approach of post behavioralist be like. Okay, so technique is important, but the purpose for which the technique is used is more important. He is making the distinction, right? He himself emphasized on the importance of technique, but here is he is making distinction that technique is important, but the purpose for which the technique is used is more important. It is better to be vague than to be non-relevant. Okay, post behavioralism does not reject values, rather invite values. They should have capacity to solve the crisis. Okay, the solve the crisis which was prevalent, like major civil rights movements, why they were happening during those times, right? And various violation of feminist right and etc., right? The capacity to solve the crisis. We should promote such values which contribute towards the flourishing of human civilization. Okay, political science is an applied science, right, which can be both action oriented. At the same time, it should also be very much relevant to the issues which was prevailing in the society. Hence, it makes it an applied science which can be applied rather than pure science. Okay, the responsibility of social scientists is bigger than the responsibility of natural scientists. Very fair point. Political science is extremely useful discipline, needs to be actively promoted by universities, research foundations, and etc., right? So, what is the conclusion? It is true that behavioralists had produced rich literature on election studies, but such studies are not sufficient because elections are not only the phenomena under political science, right? There are various important phenomena under the political science. Political scholars cannot ignore the normative issues like justice, right, liberties, etc. And these are the more important political phenomena than the electoral behaviors per se, because we see a lot of, let's say, civil rights violation, human rights, fundamental rights violation in various countries, right? uh, so thus scholars like Alfred Corbett blamed positivist and empiricist because of their major emphasis on the scientific approaches, and completely ignoring the value in the political science, right? So Dan Chamino blamed ideological reductionists responsible for the decline of the discipline. Very fair point. So thank you guys. With this, we come to the end. Uh, as in earlier slide, I have shown you the number of questions which were asked since 2011. You can refer to those sort of questions and try answering them. It will really help you answer them well, looking at the slides and the content in it. And do write answers. Practice writing more answers. It will improve your answer writing skills, and it will really help you fetch good marks. Thank you for sitting till the end, and I am hoping that you have gained uh, uh, idea of the first topic, that is political science approaches and its nature, etc. So if you really liked the video, I request you to give your like, and also do subscribe this channel for the community engagement. And I really loved being with you people. The more it is, the more I get connected to you all. Please, if you want to share anything, or if you want to give any feedback, or if you want to give any input, please do leave the comment. I'll really read them, and I'll genuinely respond to you guys. And thank you so much. Do ensure to like the video and subscribe it as well. Thank you so much.